Spring and Michael Wilbon, pardon the interruption, celebrating 15 years. Michael, congratulations. Thanks for joining us.
Dan, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Are you in for more replay, or would you like to have less replay or keep it as it is?
You know, I'm about the same on replay. I just heard you talking about explanations, and I'm always in favor of more of that. I just think, you know, I mean, if umpires are paid to do this job, and that this includes referees in the NFL and NBA as well, just make people available. You know, and it's all less sinister if you're just able to say to somebody, hey, what happened there? I mean, even I remember a situation where I was at the game. You know what? You and I might have been at this game together. Remember the game where Joey Crawford threw Tim Duncan out for laughing at him?
Yes.
And we were able to just say to Joey, did you toss him for laughing? And Joey goes, yeah, I did. Okay, you know, it wasn't Watergate. It was just, you'd like to get an explanation. You know, why was Adrian Gonzalez out? So I think the explanation could really reduce the need for more replay. I don't really see the need for more replay in any sport.
Did you think Gonzalez was out?
I'm biased. I got a horse in the race. I thought he was probably safe.
Okay.
But you know, but we see those calls every night where people miss an important strike call, and then the guy hits a home run on the next pitch, which happened to Arrieta the previous night. We people miss calls at the plate and replay gets them wrong. I'm interested now in this whole notion that there should be somebody who's not an umpire making these things. I didn't think of that.
Nope.
Because they're protecting the guys on the field because they don't want to show them up. Maybe. I mean, you're going to find conspiracies wherever.
Yeah.
But that one I didn't think of until I heard it this morning.
Are the Dodgers making a mistake by not going with Kershaw tonight?
No, I think they have a handle on it. And you know, we don't know what the conversations are between Kershaw and the pitching coach and his manager and the trainer. Like, everybody wanted to make fun of Dave Roberts. I was one of them who said before, I asked the trainer, and people said, I think it was great. I don't know if it was Pete Rose who said, well, suppose the trainer said don't go. Would he have listened to him? And maybe the answer is yes. So, you know, I mean, if he pitches like 5 times in 10 days as a starter, that's sort of insane. You know, I mean, they got somebody else, and you could make the argument either way. Do you pitch him tonight and hope to get to 3-2, and then, you know, but then you got to pitch Maeda anyway, and probably, I don't know if Game 6 or Game 7, depending on when you try to use Hill, if there is a Game 7. So I think the Dodgers have a good grasp on this and understand what it is, you know, they need from the rest of their club in addition to the god of starting pitching.
Can you imagine a life after the Cubs win a title?
You know, Dan, it's funny. I've never thought about it, to tell you the truth. My 8-year-old son said to me, and he's become, you know, he's a Cub fan. He lives in Washington primarily, but he's gotten hooked on this. And when he was about 3 years old, and he was going to these Cub games, and Bud Selig said to my wife, don't let Michael do this to your son. Don't let him do this. And I said, hey, Bud, you were a Cub fan your whole life. He goes, I know, I love him. People forget that. Bud owned the Milwaukee franchise, but Bud's a Chicagoan and rooted for the Cubs. He said, I know, you're right. And he looked at her and said, listen to me. Don't let him do this to your son. And that's sort of the, you know, no matter how much you love them, that's, you know, this conundrum you live with this franchise. And so that same son is now 8 years old, and he said to me the other day, I took him out of school to go to a playoff game. That's how twisted I probably am now. And he said, Dad, are you going to cry if the Cubs win? And I said, I don't know.
Are you going to cry if they lose?
Distinct possibility. Yeah, I've cried already if they've lost. That's happened since I was 8 years old. Are you kidding me?
And
so
your
I don't
son,
know. I've never thought about what is. Are they going to be less lovable if they win? I mean, are the Red Sox less popular? No, they're not less popular. They've won 3 times, so I don't think so.
Well, my son became an all-in Red Sox fan the year before, 2003. He became a Red Sox fan. He came home and said, I'm a Red Sox fan. I go, oh, God, no, don't do that.
You had the Bud Selig reaction.
Yeah, but then he said, no, Dad, they're going to win. I said, oh, there have been, you know, fathers and grandfathers who've never seen them win. I said, you know, get ready for the long haul. Right. And then he goes,
and then boom.
And then they win.
They win.
Yeah, and he was long suffering for a year. Like, you know, poor kid. You guys are celebrating your 15th year. Did PTI almost not happen?
Not that I know of. I mean, it almost not happened in that Tony and I didn't believe it was going to happen and didn't really care if it happened.
Was it successful right away?
Well, yeah, the rating. If you judge it by ratings, sure. I mean, I remember them telling us, and I don't know anything about ratings now. I really don't. I'm still a newspaper guy in that way. They said something like, if you get a 0.3, we'll keep you on the air. If you get a 0.4, we're going to be reasonably happy. If you get a 0.5, we're going to carry you around in chairs. And, of course, they didn't, and it got up to 0.8 relatively quickly. And so it was almost triple what they thought to keep us on the air, double what they thought they'd be happy with. And so if you judge the success by that, I guess so. But did it almost not happen? I don't know. It wasn't long in the works, Dan. I mean, Mark Shapiro took me to dinner one night in L.A. during the NBA Finals and said, I want to put this on the air. This is like the day after he was named Czar of Programming or whatever the title might have been. And he said, I'm going to put it on the air, and that's my first act. And I said, the second act is to fire you for putting two sports writers on the air. But there wasn't it wasn't like there were any backroom dealings and negotiations and I want this. It was like, what? What are you talking about? I mean, you were one of the people I said to, what do you think of this? And I think people were a lot more encouraged about the notion of it than Tony and I were.
Well, I remember Kornheiser asked me about it. He goes, can you believe he's walking around with John Walsh, and he goes, can you believe they're giving us a TV show? And I remember telling you, as long as they allowed you to be you.
Yes. I remember you saying that.
And if you got to do that, then because that's the brilliance of PTI is you guys can have an opinion. You can root for a team. You can dislike a commissioner, even though we have relationships or had relationships.
We break all the rules.
Yes.
We do. And I remember literally that sentence coming out of your mouth multiple times. And they did. And I think part of that, too, was Tony and I, after listening to people like you who had been around the Bristol culture for a long time, a few other people said the same. They said, listen, if they're not going to let you be you, don't do it. And we understood that. We got that right away. But I still didn't think – I just remember thinking, this is crazy. But after we were on the air a couple of months, I thought, you know what? The network doesn't have this because at the time it didn't have opinion.
Yes.
And – this is gonna be fine.
Well, I
wasn't counting years, but
we were trying to do it under the veil of secrecy, Keith and I, where you could have an opinion, but you were doing it late at night, hoping that management was not staying up, whereas you guys were at 5 Eastern, and management, of course, is still awake, and some of them were. And they're listening to this opinion where you're calling out a commissioner of a league that they have a relationship or a coach or, and there were topics. I mean, Tony got in trouble, but he didn't get in trouble on PTI, right?
No, that was radio. That's right.
It was radio?
But we were calling, Dan, that's a great point. I mean, I remember we early on in the show, remember when Bud Selig, who we both love, would just not talk about stuff publicly. Like you could go to his office and sit and talk to you for an hour, but he wouldn't talk publicly.
Yes.
And Tony and I kept saying, hey, Bud, get out from under your desk. And at the time, that's not, the height of criticism now, but at the time, I guess in 2001 it was. And Bud called both of us and said, okay, enough, I'll come on. And even after we were screaming at him to come out from under the desk, and he came on, and it was great, and it was different. And he even said at the time, this puts a pressure on people that there hasn't been. And now we can't imagine that's only 15 years old, that kind of criticism that says, step up here, open your mouth.
Well, Tony's done that with Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA.
Yeah, because that's because Tony doesn't actually go and talk to Adam Silver, who's available to talk publicly any time, and I do.
And you called out Goodell before.
Oh, all the time, and I shouldn't say I'm proud to say, but I will say I'm going to toot the horn to this extent. I was doing this years ago before we got to, domestic violence issues and things that were of that level of seriousness. I just thought that Roger Goodell, who I got to know reasonably well when I was covering the NFL for years, that he was a different guy. That the guy we see now is not the Roger Goodell who I thought was uniquely qualified to be the commissioner. I don't see that guy anymore. And so that's what I was calling out. What happened to that guy that then you read stories later that he's shoving, his supervisor of officials? I mean, really? Where'd that guy come from? because that's not the guy who everybody thought was going to make a great commissioner. So, yeah, I think it's our jobs to do that as we did in our columns in the newspaper, in the Washington Post, as we would do in the green room. I mean, one thing about we're not scared of anybody. And if they want to get angry about it and come back at us, they got a form to do that.
Well, congrats, and good luck to your Cubs, Mike. We
need all the well wishes we can get. Mr. Patrick, thank you for that.
Are the Indians a better story this year, though, than your Cubs, Mike?
They're as good a story as anybody because of the city's situation, not the franchise, but the city. I mean, given that what LeBron started off there, and I'm sure you've had Terry Francona on recently. He speaks to that so eloquently about the sort of the momentum and the way the city feels about itself and the people there feel about themselves in the aftermath of the LeBron championship. And so I think they're a great story. Look, not as many people care about the Indians as the Cubs.
Yeah.
When you go to an Indians road game, you don't have 15,000 people there rooting for the Indians. You just don't have that. Cleveland's not Chicago. And I say that, yes, I'm a Chicagoan, but I also travel enough and go to games enough. Do you see the number of Cub fans they can show at a Dodger game?
Oh, I know.
In Los Angeles.
I know. All right. Well,
and
you're going to be.
They're a better story.
You're going to be crying win or lose.
Yeah, apparently so.
Thank you, Mike.
Apparently. Thanks, Dan.
All right, Michael Wilbon.
The Dan Patrick Show, weekday mornings on Audience.